Hi guys, Macy Lou here, and I'm really excited because I'm filming a new Q&A today. And you guys have asked me some really good questions and I am ready to answer them, so let's just get right into that. So Mandy Crossbow asks, when did you actually start painting? And I really like this question because I haven't always been a painter. In fact, I used to only draw. I would only sketch, really. It was more like sketches and doodles, and that was really it. And it took me a long time to really start painting because I wasn't really into using paintbrushes. And back in high school, when I used paintbrushes, it just was always a disaster, and I much preferred painting with my fingers. But as I got older and as I started to use like watercolors and stuff, that's kind of how it started. I started painting with watercolors, but it was more like illustration and more of like a stylized style, I guess. It was more like on the anime side, it was very anime inspired. My artwork is still anime inspired to some extent because I'm very influenced by my past anime interests. But eventually I found this artist named Happy D Artist, and I found another artist named Tanya Shatsiva. And both of them, I've really been inspired by so many other artists, including Mav Graves, but Tanya Shatsiva and Happy D Artist really inspired me to actually push myself into trying painting more. Like I said, I was already painting with watercolor, but it was more like an illustrative thing. It wasn't as much like a painterly thing. And so I really was like seeing this art from Happy D Artist and Tanya, and I was just like engrossed and like so enchanted by their artwork. And I saw that like they were using oil paints or acrylics. Oh, actually Happy D was using oil and Tanya was using acrylics. And it really got me to thinking, like, I had been dabbling in acrylic paint already for a few months, and I was like, you know what, I really want to try to get good at this because I sucked. I sucked really bad. And that's okay because, like, when you first start a new medium, you're going to suck, most likely. If you don't, then lucky you. But most of us, we suck when we first try something new. But that's okay. Just keep on trying. But anyway, that's kind of how I got into painting. I saw other artists who were producing work that I was in love with and that I was really enchanted by. And I looked at what mediums they were using and how they were getting those effects and what techniques they were using, and that is what helped me decide to branch out more into painting and also into the world of surrealism. So Mandy also asks, how long have you been working full-time as an artist? I'm glad you asked because it's been a little while, but I'm about to be on my 1-year anniversary of working from home and painting as my job. So it's really been a journey, but I have to say I don't regret a thing. I'm really happy and excited, and of course I recognize that I'm extremely fortunate that I have a support system around me, especially my husband, who really supports me in many ways. And I think that, like, if it weren't for him, I probably would still be working at my last job, which the place that I worked before was actually not a bad job, and I made pretty decent money at it too. But I wasn't personally happy with it because, I wasn't following my real dreams, I guess. So I wanted to really try it and see where I could go with it, and it was probably the best time for me to do it. So yeah, it's been almost a year because November 17th of 2017 was when I quit, or was my last day at my regular graphic design job. Brick and mortar job that I drove to, So yeah, it's been almost a year. Not quite yet, but next month it will have been a year. So thank you so much for your questions, Mandy. I really appreciate it, and I love you. Shout out to Mandy. I'll have to share her link in the description for you guys, because her artwork is really pretty. Let's see. Chris X asks, what inspired you to get into painting? And I kind of already answered that in the last question, so I guess refer back to that answer, because it's really the same answer. It's the fact that, like, I was making a certain kind of art, and I was looking around me, and I was enjoying different kinds of art, and I was seeing, like, they were using different mediums than I was. They were doing a different style than I was, and I really wanted to push myself into a more surreal direction and less in a cartoon direction. Because I was kind of headed toward like a cartoon direction and an anime direction, and I wanted to head to a more painterly and surreal and fantasy direction. That's probably the best way to explain that. So let's see, what else do we have here? So Alethea asks, what got you into art? What kept you going? So I've been into art ever since I was like a toddler, ever since I was a baby, actually. I was really, really little when I started, so I don't have any memory of not making art. But I think a lot of people probably have the same answer. A lot of people probably were artists when they were little kids, and maybe they kind of like went away with it, or kind of did away with it for a while and then got back to it as an adult. But for me, it's always been there. I've been doing art since I was little. I don't really know when you would consider it art, because it's like, you know, obviously I wasn't like a professional at like 3 years old, but I'm just saying, like, I was drawing and doodling and trying to make images ever since I was like a baby. And then, so I've never really stopped. Like, even when I got really busy with college and I got really busy with my career as a graphic designer, I never really stopped being an artist. I was always creating, I was always illustrating and sketching, but I wasn't really into, you know, this type of art at the time. But it just eventually I just eventually gravitated toward this type of art and toward creating it. So I guess it's hard for me to really answer the question, because I've always kind of done this, more or less, just in different styles and different mediums. But I will say what keeps me going through it is I don't really ever feel like stopping. Like, even if I have a day where I just don't feel like doing stuff, the inspiration is always pretty much there, like, in general. I'm not saying, like, I'm always super inspired and motivated, like, in the moment. I'm just saying, like, in the back of my mind, I'm always trying to think of, like, what am I going to work on next? Because it's just, I don't know, it's just in me. I just want to make stuff. And I think, like, sometimes what's hard is, like, having ideas but not knowing how to incorporate them into my art. But then vice versa, it's like the other side of it is when you don't have ideas but you really want to make art. And these things do happen to me. So I do have these like little struggles here and there, but I never have the struggle of completely wanting to quit, ever. So I think, like, it's hard for me to answer that question because I'm not the best person to ask, because I'm just always wanting to make. I'm just always wanting to create stuff. And I think part of it has to do with how my brain works, and how, like, I kind of just wish there was this other world we could go to, like this other universe or this other planet we could just visit and, like, just relax and enjoy the scenery and enjoy the aesthetics of everything and just, like, be calm and open-minded and be ourselves. You know, I wish that there was this world. It's sort of like this little fantasy imaginary world in my brain, and I think that when I make art, it's sort of like a reflection of that side of my brain. So hopefully that answers that question. The next question is, what's your dream project? And Haley was actually the one who asked that question, so thank you, Haley, for the question. This is a hard one because I have a lot of dream projects that are kind of vague and don't really, aren't really fleshed out, but the most fleshed out dream project is something that you guys have probably heard me talk about like a billion times, and it was my secret art project. Well, I have definitely postponed the secret art project for quite some time, but it is still a dream project of mine. And I will say, just in general, what it is so you guys get an idea, even though it was a secret art project. Basically, how it's different than my other art and my other projects is that it is an art installation project. I have been very passionate and inspired by art installation projects for years, and I've never actually created my own. I think in a sense I try to weave that idea into some of my Instagram photos and some of my the ways that I lay out my studio, or how I used to have, that whole, that dolly shelf that I have in my old studio. It's sort of kind of along the lines, it's basically a project idea that would bring together all of my interests. My interest for this imaginary world and this surreal artwork that I like to make, plus my interest in dolls and custom art dolls, as well as just store-bought dolls that are just still in their boxes, or Polly Pockets, or My Little Pony, all the things that I had in my childhood. Some things I didn't have and some things I did. But these things that remind me of my childhood, mixed with my favorite colors, mixed with the art that you see behind me. So that sounds very all over the place, but I can definitely sit here right now and imagine what it would look like. It already exists in my head in multiple different forms and ways. But yeah, that's my dream project, is an art installation that combines all of those things. Imagine a lot of pink, a lot of purple, a lot of blue, maybe some 80s stuff, 80s and 90s stuff thrown in there, mixed with all these things from our childhoods. And also this art on the wall with the surreal women and maybe even some men too, because I do want to start painting men more. But really colorful stuff, sometimes maybe even psychedelic kind of stuff. There is some art that's along the psychedelic side that's really beautiful, heavily saturated colors. But definitely think of those things when you think of my dream project, because it would be something like that. It would be an art installation that people actually visit and experience. I want to create a whole experience. I want there to be music playing and everything. So yeah, that's my dream project, but it's been postponed because it's such a big project that takes so much, first of all, money, second of all, a lot of hard work and dedication and attention to detail, third of all, a space to put it all in, which, hey, I have a space now. This studio would actually be a great space to do it in. I could take all this stuff down and just completely turn my studio into an art installation, and that would be the dream project. But I definitely can't work on it yet, but it's definitely something that I want to do in the future. So Ashley Meeks asks, what has been your biggest challenge? How did you overcome it, or what are you doing to overcome it? I think for me, my biggest challenge with art is it's been anatomy, when it comes to the technical side of it and the technical skill. And I think that basically all I really have been doing to try to improve it is just practicing and showing more of the form in a painting. So you see this painting, you see more of her body, in this painting you see more of her body, than in my past works, which was just the face, the girl over there, it's just her face, pretty much, her face and hair. So I'm trying to push my boundaries on my skill set that I originally had. I used to be really terrible at hands, terrible at feet, terrible at legs. And I know I don't always show all of the legs and the feet still, but I'm confident that I can do that now, because it's more of I just need to do some studies in my sketchbook and then I've got it figured out, because it's more of a mindset thing. It's going from being afraid to drawing hands or painting hands to being more like challenged, like, ooh, let me see what I can do here. You know what I mean? So I'm not like to the level I want to be at just yet, but I think I'm definitely getting there over time as I practice it more. The next question is from Haley, and she asks, ooh, also, who is your favorite living artist and who's your favorite dead artist? And do you feel their work shaped you at all? Wow, I really love this question. I know I kind of touched on my favorite artists earlier in this Q&A, but when it comes to like my favorite dead artist, my favorite artist from like the classics, you know, from long ago, you know, dead artist is definitely Leonardo da Vinci, for sure. I've had a super duper passion for his work ever since I was in probably my first or second year of college and I was taking art history. Even though I already kind of knew of him before that, it wasn't until that art history class that I learned a lot about him and his sketchbooks and his really like intense attention to detail, especially with anatomy. That really spoke to me. Even though back at the time when I was taking that class, I was still hiding hands behind backs in my artworks and I was still just focusing on faces. I think that like my inspiration, or the inspiration that I got from his work and him as a person, really seeped in over like these years, and it finally like soaked in, and I was finally like, you know, he branched out, you know, like he was always really looking at detail and really looking at anatomy and trying to figure that out, and he figured that out, you know, and so he's definitely by far my favorite artist that is dead. But as for a living artist, I think that it's still somewhere between Tanya Shatsiva and Happy D Artist, but I can't, it's so hard for me to pick between the two because they both inspire me in vastly different ways. Their art is so different, but yet they're both in that surreal type of world. But yeah, they inspire me for totally different reasons and in different ways. So, yeah, I think that like what inspires me so much about Tanya is she is so, like, her work is very sensual, and I don't mean that in like a sexual way, I mean that in like a very, like, I mean, take that as you will, I guess. Whatever you think of when you think of sensual, it's like using your senses, you know what I mean? Like, you use all your senses when you watch her YouTube videos, for example, where she shows her artwork. She shows the artwork process, she shows the artwork up close, and she shows herself a lot. And she shows, like, she's kind of like a very chill, very, like, interesting person, and she kind of seems like she goes with the flow, but she's also kind of mysterious and kind of has, like, this dark, mysterious, I don't know, glow around her. I don't really know how to explain it. So I think that she inspires me in that way, plus her skill level is just like off the charts amazing. How she combines her surrealism skills, her anatomy skills with her fantasy and like spacey, like, you know, we're talking like galaxies and universes and stuff, like all that kind of all together. And her like she even has some like nature type stuff thrown in too, you know, like she's got bats, or she's got just so many different little like things. You know, she did a fox piece that was really amazing, and it looked like the fox was like on fire, or like made of fire actually. Just little things like that, and just like her overall personality. But then the flip side, Happy D Artist, I'm drawn to her for her very happy, just like her name, her very happy and sweet demeanor. Her style is very interesting, the way she does eyes, the way she does faces in general. Her style with like the softness of the way she does skin. and just her overall concepts are really interesting to me. So I think I probably rambled like a real long time on that question, but I hope that answers. Oh, how it shapes me. It definitely inspires me and motivates me to work on my own art. And even though it's like my art's different from theirs, I do definitely see influences that seep in, and I like that. Like on the one hand, I feel weird if it seeps in too far, because I'm like, oh, does it look too much like their stuff? I'm not, because I'm not trying to copy someone else's. I'm trying to like bring forward my own. But I definitely see influences from both of them in my work, and maybe you guys do too if you see the art in the background. But I think that like I have so many other artists that I follow and comment on their stuff on social media and enjoy looking at their art. I couldn't name them all though, because there's so many, but those are the two that are like forward in the front of my mind at all times, pretty much. Caitlin Rawl asks, what inspires you and what does your art mean to you? I would definitely say, other than all those artists and all those other things that I've already mentioned that inspire me, colors really inspire me. I'm really inspired, and it's going to sound so weird, like, because it's going to just sound like all colors inspire me. But for the most part, pinks and blues inspire me the most. And then next would be purples and maybe green, maybe. Depends on the green, like a green-blue. But after that, rainbows inspire me too, and pastel colors inspire me. So even though it sounds like all colors inspire me, and maybe to some extent they do, definitely pink and blue and purple are like my go-to colors, are like my all-time favorite colors, and I probably use at least one of those in every artwork, I would say, somewhere in the artwork, even if it's in a small way. But other things that inspire me are just like really vibrant colors out in nature, like flowers that are really bright colors, like hot pink flowers or blue flowers, anything like that really. I'm really inspired by gardens and flowers and trees, butterflies and moths. I'm really inspired by like gothic stuff too. Like I'm really inspired like by goth fashion, goth makeup, just like goth culture. So and kind of along the same veins, I'm inspired by like dark stuff, like Halloween type stuff, and just all of that kind of stuff, even though it doesn't always show in my art, because a lot of my art is more on like the bright side and like the bright color side, but like I'm still inspired by the darker stuff too. Like it all kind of comes together like into my brain, and then whatever work I make from that is just what comes out. So I would say that those are some definite inspirations. But I'm also inspired, I think, the most by the concept of individuality. I talk about that a lot. I've always been extremely inspired by just everyone being themselves and getting to be who they are and voicing their opinions and being free. Like I'm really into the concept of like freedom and expression and individuality and all that good stuff, and being able to look how you want, love who you want, be who you want, all of that stuff. So that's probably my biggest inspiration in my work and what influences my work the most. But I'd say if you were to look at my work, you may not really know that. But that's really probably what is my favorite thing in the world. So surely it's seeping into my work somehow. Let's see. Okay, the last question is from Chantel, and she asks, how do you deal with your inner critic? And she says she really wants to know for herself, lol. My inner critic. That's a tough one. I think like it's hard to deal with my inner critic, but I think like what happens is sometimes it can cause me to kind of go into somewhat of a depression, and I kind of put up a wall of denial around it. Yeah, I put up a wall of denial around it, and I kind of just write it off as, oh, I'm just not that motivated today, or oh, I'm just really exhausted. And yeah, I am exhausted sometimes, but I think that sometimes it's actually a depression from the inner critic part. But I think that like my inner critic gets quieter the more I work on art. That may sound weird, but it's like my inner critic is usually loudest when I'm like doing normal everyday stuff, like yeah, folding laundry or eating lunch, or you know, sometimes it's there like if I'm like trying to catch up on the news or something, like everyday tasks. My inner critic is louder. But when I go to the easel, my inner critic is usually pretty quiet. And I don't really know why, because you would think it would be the other way around. Because, you know, if you're making art, maybe, you know, depending on if you listen to music or not, it might be quiet, you might hear your inner critic more. But for me, like, first of all, I do either listen to a podcast or listen to music or I watch videos while I paint. So that might be part of it, but I think a big part of it is, even though I'm painting and I'm enjoying myself, I'm really concentrating on the technique. I'm concentrating on the brush strokes, and I'm concentrating on the blending. And even though that seems like a really simple thing and doesn't take a lot of brain power, it does quiet my mind a lot somehow, and maybe it does take more brain power than I realize. But it does quiet that inner critic a lot. And so I think that like the more I just dive in to my art and the more I just paint and just get it done and work hard on a piece or multiple pieces at once usually, then that's when the inner critic is fairly quiet. But I would say like other steps you could take is to just acknowledge that the inner critic doesn't ever really fully go away. Like, it's always gonna be there. And I think it's more about accepting that the inner critic is there and just acknowledging what the inner critic is saying instead of arguing with the inner critic, or instead of trying to ignore the inner critic, or instead of trying to like smother the inner critic. That sounds really like violent, but you get what I'm saying. I think it's better to just hear what it says and take what you can use from that, and then file away in a little like symbolic folder the stuff that you can't use. So that's kind of what I try to do. I'm not perfect at it. It's something that I learned through therapy, actually. It kind of is like an anxiety thing, and like an overthinking thing. Like, I overthink everything. My brain is always on, and it's always like overthinking every single thing. So definitely try to just hear it once, let it say whatever it wants to say, soak in what actually will help you. So like, if my inner critic is saying, you really suck at painting hands, gosh, you really, you know, people notice that you suck at painting hands. Like, if my inner critic were to say something like that, I would just take it and use it to get better at hands. Like, I would just look at more photos of hands. I would, like, use my hand as a reference, and I would, like, you know, try to get better at that. But if the inner critic is saying something useless, like something that doesn't really even help, like, just something vague, like, oh, your art sucks, I usually just file that away because it doesn't really help me. It just, it doesn't really do anything for me, and it doesn't really make any sense if you think about it, because it's very, art is very subjective, and lots of people are going to look at your art differently. Some are going to like it, some are going to hate it, some are going to be like, meh. So if it's just a really vague inner critic statement and it doesn't have any constructive criticism with it, I just file it away and like, I mean, whatever. It just says what it wants. But yeah, I think like a lot of times we don't realize how much of our thoughts are just like completely involuntary. Like, we can't control what comes into our head. Like, it's, you know, it's just some things just pop into our mind and it's not really necessarily from a place of truth, and it's not necessarily from a place of reality, and I think we just need to remember that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this Q&A. I really had fun answering your questions, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And if you guys don't mind to leave a little like on this video, maybe even share it if you think somebody would be interested in like art topics and answers from artists. You know, in general, I find it really interesting to watch artists' Q&As and to see like what they think about things and how they create their work and all of that stuff. So yeah, definitely share it if you feel the love. And also, I've been adding several new items to my shop. Like, a lot of new items are in my shop right now. So if you want to check that out, it is in the description. It's just macylou.com/shop. I thought I would make it super easy. Email subscribers get a special coupon code. Patrons get a special coupon code. So definitely check that out if you're interested in becoming a patron or an email subscriber. And yeah, have a great day, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye! So before I go, I just want to shout out my patrons. They're on the screen right now, and I just want to thank them so much for supporting me. They're always so super kind and sweet, and they help me out a lot. Thank you guys so much for being patrons.